Oh, something's happening. What's happening, ladies and gents? Uh, Wait, hold on. Have we got technical problems, or are we just being a little bit silly here? Let's just wait and see if YouTube is definitely connecting. Oh, and we are live. Fantastic news. Sorry, apologies to people who may or may not have just been sat there waiting for it to connect. YouTube can sometimes be something of a shit. Thanks very much for joining me tonight for this solo edition of A. Thompson and Other Disappointments. This is, as I say, like the solo editions are, it's just me like trying to make sense of the senseless, trying to take whatever is in the news and trying to wrap my head around it. And today on this, oh fuck, I almost didn't do the plug. Brought to you in association with Funk 27 Discontent Providers. Check out the website funk-27.co.uk for all of your blogs and podcasts about this dystopian nightmare that we now find ourselves living in. And it's episode 64 of A. Thompson and Other Disappointments. A story in the news this morning was it's around higher education, and I've been talking a little bit on TikToks and on Twitter about my thoughts of university, and it's, you know what, seeing a story like this, which we'll get on to in a second, really kind of hammers it home how conflicted my own opinions and stances are on this kind of shit. Because, like, I mean, look, we'll get into it in a second, but I feel like I'm coming at it from like 4 or 5 different angles, and I'm not sure that all of them are conducive with each other, which probably tells you that I'm being hypocritical somewhere, or that I haven't really thought through my stances on them. But let's just, as I say, let's try and make sense of the senseless, right? So let's get into it. There's a news story arose this morning. It was on BBC this morning. It was also on, I think it was on Sky News, and I've got it here in front of me in an article in the Guardian. It's about, as I say, higher education, and it's about this new policy idea to withdraw student loans from kids who haven't got a C or above in maths and or English. So if you don't get a C or above in maths and English, then you will no longer qualify for a student loan, right? This is from the Guardian this morning. It says, students from disadvantaged backgrounds in England could be blocked from going to university unless they get strong GCSE or A-level grades under proposals to be announced by the government this week. So key thing there, proposal. So nothing's been agreed yet. But this has all the hallmarks of a very poorly thought through policy. So, I mean, it's just as likely to get into law as anything else that Boris Johnson's government have ejaculated out into the political discourse over the last couple of years. So if we let's just reread that. Let's let that sink in for a second. Students from disadvantaged backgrounds in England could be blocked from going to university unless they get strong GCSE or A-level grades under the proposal. So it sounds bad, right? It sounds like, in a very Guardian way, it has to be said, as though the government, this like evil Machiavellian Tory government, are like they're deliberately implementing a policy to funnel working class kids out of higher education and back out down the bloody mines. You know, like that's how it sounds. It's got those sort of connotations to it. Because it's typically kids from poorer backgrounds who would need the student loans, which are looking at being restricted if you don't get a C in maths, kind of thing, right? And we can come on to the pros and cons of it in a minute if you like, but from the outset, that is how it reads, I believe, and it appears that the Guardian are singing from a similar hymn sheet, right? And I don't think that's actually what's happening here, like totally. I think it's probably a clumsily thought through policy. I don't think it's malicious and elitist maybe in the way that it comes off, but like again, we'll tap into that in a minute. The piece continues. It says on Thursday the government is to publish its long-awaited response to the Augar review of higher education funding. the Orgar Review. And The Guardian has learned that a key part of the response will be the launch of a consultation on minimum entry requirements for students to be eligible for government-backed loans for tuition and maintenance. So they're sort of alluding to my upcoming points here. They've preempted my shit hot take on this, or shit hot take, depending on how you take it. They've preempted it. So the Orgar Review, I don't know how aware of this any listeners or viewers are, but the Orgar Review for higher education funding, that was set up by Theresa May, and it was in response to a lot of the shit that Tories got about how expensive university had become. The average cost of a 3-year degree at the time was nudging £50,000. Imagine that, 50 grand. This is the thing, like a lot of us who went to university in like the late 90s and early noughties, we sort of forget how expensive it's become since then, because we're sort of so drunk on our victimhood that we had to pay tuition fees at all, because it was still like recent history. It was still like, oh man, my older brother didn't have to pay to go to university. That's really annoying that I do. And like in our day, God, I sound like such an old bastard, but when we went to university, it was still quite new, like the idea of paying to go to university. So we're still sort of embittered by that. So then when these kids today, if you like, moan about their tuition fees, we almost look at it, or I almost look at it like, yeah, me too. Us too, right, guys? We're all in it together. We got just as fucked over as you did, but we did not. It is, objectively, university students today are being horse fucked, like eye-watering buggery fucked, in their aspiration to go to university. So the average cost of a 3-year degree when this Orgar report was commissioned was about 50 grand. So like house deposit money, right? And remember, a lot of students study subjects like social anthropology and sociology and criminal psychology and so on, and then they never go into the field. They study something like sociology and they end up on the grad scheme at Boots head office. Like they got a 2-1, they have a degree, but after the gap year that they've spent banging Aussies in Copenhagen, they're sat at their desk like, wow, I'm so glad I saddled myself with a house deposits load of debt just so I can end up in an office on a trading estate on 24 grand a year. You know, like that was a really great move. Smart move there, Aid. Awesome. Like a lot of higher education in that regard has become fucking ridiculous. They changed it, and by they, I mean New Labour. Like, it wasn't always like this. It wasn't millions and millions of kids going to university for the sake of going to university. New Labour, Tony Blair, Gordon Brown, I believe it was them. I'm 90%, 90-10 positive it was Blair and Brown, brought in the first tuition fees. And it changed higher education from being kind of dusty institutions and, people training to be doctors and publicly funded to, at least by my perception, being industrialized to some extent. They would generate their own income. They would be self-sufficient to some extent. They wouldn't be reliant on the state. And it's policies like this that get Blair that sort of Thatcherite light kind of label, because moving universities outside of state funding and making people pay their way to go through university is a kind of Thatchery conservative, shrunken state kind of vibe. And as I say, right, all of this, I know it sounds like I'm being very anti-university at the moment in the introduction here, but I say this as a guy who did the whole New Labour university thing. Like, my degree, I got a 2-1 in music industry management. And do I work in the music industry? No. I mean, at least I work in an industry. I have that going for me, because I reckon a lot of early noughties, late 90s graduates who studied sociology and, leisure centre management are like, I think they're this generation's out of work actors to some extent, bringing cups of tea and sandwiches out to table 12. I think there's a whole slew of 30 to 40-year-olds who did the uni thing, paid off their student loans, but they're still in jobs working alongside people who didn't do any of it. I don't think that's outrageous to say that. So anyway, the Orgar review or report or inquiry kicked off in response to the concerns that maybe a degree in contemporary circus with physical theatre, which is a legitimate degree you can study in the UK, concerns that maybe that degree is not worth £50,000. Like, if a degree in fucking contemporary circus and physical theatre costs 50 fucking grand, you know, anyway, in response to that, they were saying, and there were some concerns and lobbying to say, you know, maybe we need to look at this because this is getting a bit out of control, how pricey this is getting. We don't want it to get like the US, where it costs, you know, the parents have to basically save their entire lives just to get their kids into the next stage of saving their entire life. You know what I mean? Like, it's just circular, and nobody ever actually gets wealthy because everyone's always saving for their kids' college fund. And so nobody wanted that here, so they set up this report, and one of the findings was that you should be able to pay back the loan over 40 years, so an extended term, and that tuition fees should be reduced by like 20% or something, and interest on the loans should go down like while you're studying, and maintenance grants should come back so that if people were a bit broke and strapped for cash and they came from deprived backgrounds or something, they would have some emergency support. And all of this would cost like $500 million. That's what they worked it out. They were like, well, you know, 600 million probably, I guess, you know, finger in the air estimate, $500 million. And here's what's kind of funny, right? The report was set up to address the fact that university was becoming unaffordable to a lot of people. So we're like, we better set up this report to look into this. And the report comes back and says, yeah, bring back grants, drop tuition fees, make it cheaper. Right? That was the you know, the broad kind of findings of this report were like, it is too expensive, and here's the shit that you need to make cheaper and more affordable and more inclusive. And now the government have listened to this report, and their conclusion, having read it and checking out all the findings and recommendations, is, oh, cool, yeah, well, I tell you what, we will reduce charges, and we will bring back grants, and generally we'll make it cheaper for everyone, and we can afford to do all of that if we ostensibly shrink higher education by making it impossible for a fucking chunk of you to get a student loan. So millions of you will no longer be able to get the financial support now. That's how it's like allowing more kids to have an easier time of it in university by completely decimating a whole chunk of theirs, like, chances of even fucking arriving at university. It's so perfectly Johnsonian, isn't it? It's like zero forethought or appreciation for how it works, how it looks, or like any depth of understanding or appreciation for the repercussions. It's just, we need to make university cheaper so more people can access it. Okay, cool. Fuck it off for the kids who didn't get A to C in maths and English, unless they're rich enough to circumvent the student loans process. And then if they are, then whatever, it doesn't matter. It won't affect them. They honestly have the empty-headed vacancy of, like, they could rent out Nadim Zahawi, he's the education secretary. They could rent out his fucking cranium as a COVID-safe drinking venue. It's that empty and airy in there. And look, I know on the face of it, it doesn't sound too bad. Like, when you just read it at face value, and this is the problem with half the fucking policies from Team Johnson, is that you can forgive people for misinterpreting them as sort of harmless. And the kind of policies that they come out with are presented in, like, let's say the Daily Mail or the Express, or, like, you could totally understand how somebody would read about this policy and be like, yeah, well, you know, if you want to go to university, a uni is a place for smart people to be further educated to a higher standard. So why would you want to why would somebody who couldn't get an A to C in maths and English be headed for university anyway? So, like, you know what I mean? Like, it's on the face of it, it doesn't sound too bad. C in maths, C in English. A lot of jobs require that. I think a lot of university courses, even ahead of time, require that you have A to C in English. It speaks to a certain standard, doesn't it? I can sort of understand, especially with English, right? Chances are, whatever you're studying, there's going to be exams and coursework. So to be competent in English, I think that feels understandable, palatable. But GCSE maths, like, really? Why is this lender's responsibility it now including to check up, like, if my maths is up to a standard, if I'm studying fine art, if I go to university to study fine art, or if I'm going to the Royal College of Music, why the fuck did the student loans company care if I know trigonometry and the Pythagoras theorem or some shit? Why is it on the student loans company to assess what isn't? Do you know what I mean? Like, there's something really troubling about that. And elitism aside, right? Because it is a bit elitist to pull up the drawbridge for the kids who are reliant on government-backed loans, right? That is. But that shit aside, it's kind of funny, broadly speaking. Like, is GCSE maths essential for getting a loan now? Really? Like, is that where we're headed? We're testing people's maths before they'll let them sign up for a loan. Like, when did that change? Because I'm pretty sure giving loans to people who can barely perform arithmetic is how most of Western capitalism is structured. Like, most of Western capitalism is like, yeah, so you want a loan? And the guy's like, yeah, I'm here for a loan. Yeah, for £80,000, yeah? Yeah, could you just take the crayon out of your mouth long enough to sign here, please? Thank you. Brain damaged road accident victim. Here's your check. Mom, I got the money for Disneyland, Mom. You know, like, that is most of Western capitalism, is just fucking predatorial targeting of people who can't afford a fucking financial instrument and selling it to them with a jacked up APR. And, you know, but now out of nowhere, it's like, right, okay, we're going to assess if your maths is good enough for you to get this student loan. It's like, in any other context, they'd be like, no, fuck it, you can have a loan. And you, yeah, sure. We'll cripple you with debt. Absolutely we will. Are you sure 18-year-olds should have £50,000 worth of debt? Yeah, sure. Fuck it. Don't infantilize them. They're adults. That's funny. Like, they're adult enough to take out a student loan for £50,000 when their frontal lobe hasn't fucking developed. They're adult enough when they're filling out UCAS forms to decide all this shit. But, you know, and at that point, they're what, 16, 17? But are they adult enough to vote? No. No. I don't know. Stories like this make me realize how conflicted my own opinions on higher education really are, you know? Like, it's... Like, I think shit like this is bad because I can see it pricing working class people out of getting to university and improving their situation. Like, social mobility. But social mobility already feels like a relic of a bygone era, doesn't it? It's one of these things where, like, I read or heard a statistic about this a few weeks ago where they said that social mobility has collapsed. It's, you know, it's at its lowest. People who start off on council estates are the least likely to be able to change that situation and go on to be financially successful. That is the lowest likelihood now than it has ever been. Now, I can't remember where I heard that, so I'm not going to cite you a reference. If you want to go away and look it up, fine. But I absolutely believe that because there's been so many cuts over the last, like, 15 years and so much fucking hacking away. And now shit like this, you know, it's like take a modern young working class kid now, less disposable income than ever. They can't save. Their parents can't save. They're stuck in a fucking rent trap. And now we're going to make it harder still to get into university, to gain a qualification and become a lawyer or a doctor and improve and get themselves out of that situation. Like, I find that infuriating because not to fucking, like, go all woe is me or anything, but, like, my situation was kind of not dissimilar to that. Like, we were never, like, fucking, you know, hand to mouth, like, eating breadcrumbs and But we weren't flushed with cash. Like we lived on council estates. There were times when I'd saved up. I think it was about £200 from like my paper round money when I was like 14. Do they even have paper boys anymore? Maybe that's a conversation for a different episode when we're talking about automation and job losses and tech and stuff. But anyway, I'd saved up a load of money from my paper round to buy this guitar amp. I saved up for weeks and months, and then I saw my mum in tears at the sink, and I was like, "What's wrong?" And she was stressing about money, and I said to her, I was like, "I've got like £200 upstairs. If you need to borrow it, you can borrow it, like just to get you through the month." And she did. She borrowed £200 off her 14-year-old son, I think I was at that point, and I think she felt some shame at having to do that. And she paid it back to me the next month, and that's fine. And I don't, there's no judgment there at all. I know that some people have it incredibly tough. And then I went on to university, and now my situation is much more comfortable than I think hers was at that time, with her being a single parent, with us being on council estates, with her job being a secretary versus what my job is now. But I find it infuriating that they would now try to make it harder for a child in my position back then to then go on and try to get themselves out of that situation. Now, it's not, look, for me, it's not actually that clear cut. I don't want to get all, self-obsessed and narcissistic and tell you my life story, but I can tell you that this is where it all gets a bit conflicted for me, because I'm pro you having the opportunity to go to university to better your situation, but you should know it's, like, for me, it didn't actually pay dividends. Like, my lifestyle now is dramatically improved from the circumstances that I grew up in. But it's not, I wouldn't put it down really to university or to my degree. I think I mentioned at the beginning, I studied music industry management, and I don't work in the music industry. I have never worked in the music industry. So it's kind of, to what value would you attach to that piece of paper and the fact that I went to university for 3 years when it's had no measurable impact on my life? And also, you know what? Like, you have to factor in, this is where another conflict comes from. It's like, I do kind of think that university is sort of over. This is the thing, like, I'm pro your opportunity and I'm pro your decision. Like, you get to choose if you want to go to university. And if all the rich kids are going to university, then fuck them. You get to go too. It should be equal. It should be equality of opportunity. Like, you all get a chance to make something of yourself. And if you put in the work and keep your head down, the best rise to the top. And it's a true meritocracy. That's how it should be. But in terms of, like, what university is and whether I think it makes sense in the modern world, I mean, the jury is kind of a bit out on that one. Like the format of learning and teaching like that was dreamed up in a time where the optimal way of educating people was to sit them all in one room and have a grey-haired guy up front bellowing philosophy at them. And rich people would send their kids there, and they'd have discussion seminars about what would happen if time fucked matter or some shit, like deep philosophical or physics-based discussions that would not be able to take place anywhere else in your village or in your town up north. And because that all made sense at that time, you have a handful of surgeons or a handful of lawyers who had the experience and who could or would agree to teach, and they couldn't be everywhere to teach all of these hundreds of different pupils. So you got the people who wanted to learn to trek down to London to learn that thing, or to wherever, and to all sit together in one room, and then he could teach all 100 of them at the same time. It was economical to do it that way. But now we have the internet, meaning you could just learn the shit from anywhere. You don't have to pay tuition fees even. You could just pay $10 a month for Coursera, or Pluralsight, or Egghead, or, pick any, Code Academy, fucking any of these online learning things. You can learn a valuable skill, a marketable skill that's going to earn you more money than you currently earn in your call center job or your teaching assistant job. You go in there and you learn user experience or online marketing tools or executive assistant blah, blah, blah. Like, fucking, you fill in the blanks. There's ways and means to learn all of this stuff online, and you just pay like the $10 a month subscription fee to Coursera. And there's no halls, there's no maintenance, there's no loans. So there's a huge part of me, like, where if people go, they're trying to stop me from going to university, I'm like, good, don't fucking go. Are you going to sign off on a 50k debt when you're 18? 18. You know, like your brain hasn't fully developed and you're like, oh, fuck it. Yeah. When you could learn something for a couple of £100 online. You know, I feel like in the 21st century, it's fucking madness to have this archaic education model. And it's not even like, if we're talking the traditional university model of everyone goes to a lecture hall and the guy teaches up the front, and it's that versus Coursera or Pluralsight and online stuff. It's not even apples and oranges like that. They're not that different. Not like after COVID. If you're paying tens of thousands of pounds for a bunch of university lectures, tens of thousands for that, I'd be really careful about them saying things like here's how they would market it. They would go like, they'll say, well, we're a modern university and we use the latest technology, and as a student of Birmingham University, you'll get exclusive access to lectures in real time. Because it's like, boil it down, and what is it? It's a video of a guy teaching. So if it's a video of a guy, it's like they're the same fucking product. It's like they're doing remote video lectures and Coursera are doing video lectures. I feel like if uni shit now is just work from home remote lectures with COVID and you know, and tutors are like, yeah, just upload your work in PDF format and then log on to the portal and submit your essay, and I'll just click the blue button if you want to raise your hand in the lecture, and then just write the question in the chat applet. You know, if it's that kind of vibe, then really it is a question of, do you want to pay 50 grand for videos, or do you want to pay £200 for videos? Look, 150 students taking your course. 150. What is that? 150 times £50,000. What even? See, I would fail my minimum C grade in maths now. Wait, hang on. Let me see if I can. 5 times 15 is 75. Is it? So that's like the 75. 7.5 million. Is that right? Maybe. I hope that's right. 150 times 50,000 is 7.5 million. I think in my head. It's either that or more. So 7.5. In fact, you know what? Fuck this. Let's just work it out. I don't want to be fact checked and have people in the comments going, "You fucking idiot, Aid." So 150 students times 50. Yeah, fucking 7.5 million pounds. Fuck me. 7.5 million pounds. That's just brought in from your year. How fucking nuts is that? On one course, 7.5 million pounds in revenue for your shitty bachelor's degree in leisure centre management. And that's 1 year out of 3. You've usually got 3 years running at the same time, right? You got the first year, then you go on to your second year, and then, you know, maybe you've even got a sandwich course year and you're still paying tuition fees for your catch-ups and all that shit. 7.5 million per year. So let's say let's round it up, right? 3-year degree, 7, 14, 21 million for a whole course of people paying that. 21 million a year for 3 years worth of those people. That shit is an earner. Oh my God. I tell you what, 7.5 million, those remote lectures on video, they better be on some fucking 4K definition 3D goggle shit and presented by Matt Damon. Like, Matt Damon's agent is fucking phoning him going like, yeah, I got a awesome role for you. And he's like, oh, cool. Like, what, like, lead in a movie, or am I going back to Mars, or like, is it the Bourne Supremacy 5, or like no, it's you get $1 million just for introducing 3 lectures for the University of Kent. Knock yourself out. Do I have to leave my hotel? I've got to fly over there? No, you can just do it on Skype. Like, they better fucking up like 7.5 million. So I don't know. I think don't go to uni. I think, just to hark back to my original point, it's kind of like you should have the same opportunity as the rich kids. Everyone should have the opportunity to go to a place, regardless of their background. And if the university are willing to take your grades, whether it's like, a C or D or E in maths, if they give you a pass, that's up to them. If they think you're smart enough and they're going to let you in, that's up to the university. I don't know why it's down to a lender to say, like, it really speaks to this idea that the Tories are completely in a bubble. Like, it hasn't even occurred to them, the optics of how bad this looks. And here's the thing, right? I mentioned this at the beginning, or I sort of alluded to the fact that I don't think that this is a sort of, evil Machiavellian Tory policy where what they're trying to do is edge out the working class. Like, I did a video on this on TikTok this afternoon, and a couple of the comments back were saying, like, yeah, because they don't want working class people getting educated. I don't think that's the case. I think on balance of probabilities, what this is a very poorly thought through policy. Like, as I said, off the back of that report, they were told that they needed to reduce certain costs to make it more accessible. And their go-to way of doing this was going, well, how can we stop? How can we make fewer people go to university? Because then we wouldn't have to, like, to satisfy this in the same way. We can make it cheaper and more manageable for some people to go to university, but we're going to have to cut the number of people taking student loans, and then it will balance out the cost, because student loans are government backed. And here's the other thing I think it is I recall having a chat with a friend of mine a couple of years ago, where he was saying that the bubble of the student loans themselves as an asset class is a ticking fucking time bomb. He was just like, oh, bailouts for banks and, subprime. It's kind of like it's in that region. Like, at some point it's going to blow. And I think that's been well documented now. I think people are genuinely concerned about what's going to happen to these loans that have been dished out over the last 20 years. And a lot of the students just have not paid them back because they've never actually, either they've stayed in education, like they're just getting degree after degree and then a master's, and then they do this, or they go traveling and then they come back and live with their parents. And these loans, the condition of them is that you never have to pay them back if you don't earn over a certain amount. And look, we all know people, and I'm not saying this in a snidey way. I'm not saying it in a sort of, there's no snark in my makeup when I'm saying this. But we have all met people who have gone to university, they studied a little something, and then they come back and they work in a cafe for a bit and they save up some money and they go to Thailand. And then they doss around, they smoke a bit of weed, and then they come back. And then they work in a shop for a bit, and then they save up some more money and they start a little, maybe they get a job in a gallery, and they went to university and it was very much in line with their sort of like liberal weed smoking values. And they met people of a similar mindset, and that's great. And it's cool. It's great that you've broadened your horizons. And I don't even think you should have to pay back the student loan situation. But I think that we all know people who have kind of lived that lifestyle. That's very carefree, hemp, cardigan-y kind of weed smoking thing where they're just like, yeah, I don't know, I'll get round to it. Maybe one day if I'm earning enough, then I'll start paying it back. And those people, that is still an asset class. That's still a loan somewhere on a spreadsheet where some exhausted, probably graduate is sat there going like, oh, well, yeah, there's still like 30 reds on the spreadsheet and they're not earning anything. I can see on their national insurance they're not really earning anything. So what are we going to do? There's nothing, there's no way that we can recoup that. So yeah, I think, look, my advice to anyone, if you have any stock in any advice that I give anyone, is save your fucking money, train online, move to, here's a wild idea. I wish I'd done this, right? Train online, learn JavaScript, right? And then move to wherever your friends go to university. Because if your friends are going to start studying sociology and criminal psychology, and maybe they do genuinely want to be a criminal psychologist, but if they just find it a bit a bit interesting. And then you know that they're actually going to, come out and then work in a call center or something afterwards. Here's what I wish I had done, and it's going to sound a bit cunty, but I think train online, learn JavaScript, move to wherever your friends go to university, and then just get a job doing like whatever it is that you trained online to do. So if you do JavaScript, then get a job doing JavaScript somewhere near them, and then be like with them there at university. Then you've still got the lifestyle. You can even live with them if you want in a house share, but you'll be earning money. And while they envelope deeper and deeper into debt, into 50 grand or 60 grand's worth of debt, they're going to be saddled with it throughout their 20s. Like if I was 18 again now, I'd self-learn programming, then I'd move to Brighton or Kent or something and just do contract work for 500 quid a day. And I'd just be writing unit tests and scratching my balls, like while your mates slowly, qualify, absolutely, but then just the debt is just there. And then you go around their house share for dinner or something, and they're all eating beans on toast, broke, spending the last of their maintenance check on 2-litre bottles of Super Boss, and you're there donning a well-embellished tunic, drinking moe out of a silver goblet or something. Like, I wish I'd had that lifestyle when I was at university, like the outrageously rich guy in the house share. That would have been fucking amazing. That's my advice to anyone, is like self-learn, go get a job where all of your friends go to university, so you still got the lifestyle, you're still going out, you've got fucking shit tons of money whilst they envelope in debt, and you get to feel kind of smug, like I said, like I don't want to sound snark about it. I appreciate it sounds a bit cunty, but it would be fun. I think there'd be a lot of fun to be had if you were the rich guy, the rich contracting programmer. And I know that sounds maybe that sounds a little bit like fantastical to some people. Like, if you started self-learning at 18, could you really be contracting by the time, you get down there? Well, probably not. But I used to work with a team of developers, and there was a contracted like developer there on about £500 a day, and he was about 21, and he had already contracted. He'd worked around the world to the point where he was so well versed in contracting and tech recruitment and working on new projects and new apps, and like he just knew the whole shit inside out. And whilst he was sat there, it was quite jarring listening to him talking about how he was constructing, genuinely, I'm not bullshitting you, a 21-year-old kid talking about how he was constructing shell companies to avoid tax in the UK. And it's like, now I look back on that, I'm just like, I really should have said something. I should have said, that's kind of gross, but nobody wants to, like, I was a junior developer at the time, so I don't want to stand there as a junior developer and talk to the super experienced, like, contract developer and be like, I actually have a problem with your tax avoidance, sir, and I will be requesting no, like, you're not going to do that. Anyway, look, I'm going way off on a tangent, as per usual. Is there anything that I feel like maybe I touched on something earlier that I haven't actually come back to? But I don't know. Hopefully I've covered everything. The only thing oh no, that's right. I'll just quickly leave you with this. So when I was talking about like my situation, and how little university has really kind of impacted my life, I think it's just important to caveat that with the sort of implicit, or sort of sub words escape me a little bit at the moment, but it's kind of like bubbling under the water, that sort of vibe, right? The impact that having gone to university can have just on its own for some people. So the first thing is the independence thing, right? There's this idea in the UK that university culture, like you move away from your parents maybe for the first time, and you go and live independently, and suddenly you're managing bills and you're making friends who are like-minded. It's not like school. It's not like school where the rough kids dominate and the really, I don't know, slutty rough girls dominate, and it's not to sound judgy in that respect, but school is kind of an unpleasant vibe if you're in any way intelligent, I think, or it was in our state school comprehensive. University is a different thing, because when you get to university, everyone is there to learn, And there's a certain type of person that goes to uni. I know that sounds, I hope that doesn't sound snobby, but there is. You get far less of that like high school bullshit that's so well characterized in cheesy American movies. In university, it's just a different vibe. And when I left college, I went from school to college, off to university. I guess you could say that it was my first real exposure to academia, and maybe that had some sort of impact on me and made me sort of shoot for the stars a bit more. I really don't know, not consciously anyway. I mean, apart from anything else, it was a converted school, so it didn't look like some big posh red brick university. It was like just looked like a fucking comprehensive. The second thing is, it's sort of there is a possibility that in interviews in my 20s that people saw my CV and they saw that I had gone to university and that there was a 2-1 on there. And even though the subject that I studied, which I mentioned was music related, even though that wasn't relevant to the job, that they felt it said something about me, and they were willing to give me a shot over maybe like another candidate who I pipped to the post. It could be that there was another candidate equally suited to the role, but who just hadn't gone to university. And the hiring manager in that instance may well, I don't know if this has ever happened, but I totally accept that is possible. So when I'm saying shit like university didn't actually really do an awful lot for me, I'm worldly enough and aware enough of things like classism and privilege and the way that we perceive graduates in this country, to know that there is a possibility that implicitly it may have benefited me. But I never applied for any, I don't think I applied for any like grad schemes or anything. I probably should have done. And then I'd have more interesting tales to leave you with. But yeah, I don't know. I think that's important to clarify. And off the back of that, when we talk about social mobility and the dividends that having gone to university can pay. So like if I look at my own situation, and you're not supposed to speak like anecdotally, anecdotal evidence is not everything, right? But from my own situation, I came up on council estates. I went to a state school comprehensive, single mother, blah blah blah. And then I went to university, and if you looked at me on paper, you would say, oh, well, there you go. That's social mobility in action. You started off here, and then you went to university, and now you live a certain lifestyle. You've improved your situation. Well done. Here's a flag. Go and fly it for university culture everywhere. And I'm like, no, not so fast. Because what's actually happened is I went to university, and then, as I say, like I accept there may be some sort of implicit, subconscious influences that having gone to university have had on me. But in terms of the actual paper and having come out with a 2-1, didn't really do anything. In fact, I spent pretty much all of my 20s and early 30s broke, fucking broke. And interestingly, the two guys I lived with in North London, neither went to university and both earned, I think, I've never asked them exactly how much they were earning at that point, but I estimate that they were earning about double what I was. So make of that what you will. Like it didn't go, having gone to university did not improve my financial situation at all. What actually improved my situation was self-learning, was like my girlfriend getting pregnant and it lighting a fire under my ass, and then me going like, oh shit, I really need to sort my shit out. And at the time I was just doing like, sort of projects, admin-y stuff. And it's like a good job. It's like working in a PMO. I don't know if any of you are familiar with that, but that stands for Project Management Office. Working in that environment is pretty good. But that role at that time did not pay enough for a sort of what I would call a middle-class existence, certainly not in London. And so what changed things for me was self-learning. And so off the back of that, it's difficult for me to truly fly the flag for university and social mobility to any really huge extent when my personal experience of it is that it didn't really change my situation at all. And the two guys that I ended up living with for a few years, neither went to university, and both of them were doing very well. Thank you very much. So yeah, again, not to labour my point, and I'll just leave you on this. But my stance on this, I think, broadly, and so as not to attract criticism for being a hypocrite and having conflicting opinions and stances and so on, is absolutely that you should have the opportunity to pursue the same shit as the rich kids. And if they're talking about putting something in to temper your chances because they're going to restrict student loans for you, a kid from a council estate, but the same kid having come from a rich background, an affluent background, who doesn't need to take a student loan, can get into the same university with a D or an E in maths or English, then I say that's some bullshit, right? That is not okay. And then having said that, don't fucking go to university. Just learn it all online. Save yourself 50 grand and save up for a house and invest wisely. And oh God, what a weird, abstract, shitty way to end a podcast. Anyway, thank you so much for listening. I will be back on Friday night with a podcast guest, and we're going to be talking about tribalism, division, why we are always doomed to go back and forth between Labour and Tories in cycles of like 12 years, 15 years. My guest on Friday night is a chap called Neil. He's got in touch. He's been writing a book for about 30 years about this. So I'm super psyched to be chatting with him. If you are in a position to support the podcast I'm attempting to grow, please get onto patreon.com/AidThompson. Failing that, just follow me on Twitter and say hey, and I'll catch up with you all soon. All right.